What's up, Model FAs? David DeCelle here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And we are here with someone very special that I have been keeping an eye on from afar as his company has been absolutely everywhere. And due in part to all of his and his team's hard work, along with the advisors that have experienced what they provide, but also want to do a special thank you to Tommy and the folks over at Street Cred for bringing us together. But we have Matt Middleton, who is the founder and CEO at Future Proof. Matt, welcome to the show.
Love to be here. Excited for it.
There's a lot of folks that I have on the podcast, and I must say, your background is very symmetrical and well put together. Did you do that on your own, or did you get some help from your wife? Is my question, or a designer.
It's always my wife. It's funny. During COVID, everyone was forced to go home. I was at the time working at home a couple of years prior to that, and I did the complete opposite. My wife came home and she was like, "You got to get out." And then I ended up getting a shared space. And when I got there, I would have these calls with her, just catching up on our day. And she's like, "Oh my God, you're too white for that white background. You have to do something." And so she came in one day. I was literally working, and it was like, and everyone compliments me on it. So I got to give all the credit to her.
That's awesome. Well, let's dive in. So, give us a sense of your background. You didn't, get out of school and start Future Proof. There were, steps along the way. What were those steps?
Yeah. So, I've always had a passion for finance. I went to school for it. Prior to that, I, grew up in Yonkers, New York. Very humble beginnings, I would say. Didn't have access to wealth. We didn't talk about money at all at home. Grew up relatively poor. And so college was like, oh, I'm going to change this. I'm going to learn as much as I can, and I'm going to take the industry by storm. And then graduate and very quickly realize, like, nope, I'm in the storm, right? There's nobody that was a quote unquote mentor. Maybe I did college wrong in that way. And so I just started doubting myself. And then at that time, I actually went and did, general contracting and construction work, and for 2 years post college, and was really just in like a lull state. And a buddy of mine worked at a company called Informa, really like entry level, selling attendee tickets to like biotech events. I didn't even know the industry existed at the time.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Hey, just come interview." And so I did. Had a great conversation. I think I've always been good at like holding the conversation and selling. And so right away they were like, "Oh yeah, let's get you on the phones." And then I started doing that. And so I was selling, telesales for it was a biotech event, and it was like it was focused on like clinical trials, like stage two. And I couldn't even pronounce some of the clinical trials. And I'm here like talking to scientists. And magically, I ended up, being pretty good at it, convincing a bunch of scientists who definitely didn't want to talk to me while they're in the lab to come to these events. And so by luck, I just kept like finding my way into different pockets of the company, and then I found my way to the financial services kind of industry of media. And so throughout the next decade, I pretty much worked on events, publishing, what we call business intelligence, like think about data. That Informa had many different businesses. And so I've really worked in every sector of financial services, I would say. It started early days, payments, fintech before fintech was called fintech, right? It was like the boring payment rails and the plumbing of the payment ecosystem. And I was just in that, like I just studied. I've been a student of everything and would find my way to understand the companies, the industry, be able to build not only my community, but communities around these properties. And then fast forward, I kind of got bored with that after a couple of years. I went into kind of the alternative investment space and, institutional audience, and really focused in on hedge funds at the time. And that was, probably the height of hedge funds, at least from, our professional career. And so I got a flavor of that. It's a completely different community, different vocabulary, different audience, different, marketplace. And so naturally, I just kind of became a chameleon into all of these different sectors. And then circa 2016, Informa made an acquisition of Inside ETFs from ETF.com, main audience being, RAAs. And that's when I learned about the RAA audience. I was like, "Ooh, what is this? I like this. Like, this makes me feel good," right? I went from, really tech and, operations to top 1%, if you will, and talking to like, oh, this is more approachable. They are democratizing investing and speaking to, everyday people. And I just liked it. And so from 2016 onward, I really made it a passion to kind of learn everything about what isn't that like the wealth channel and, the needs of them. And then I found myself in 2018 again bored. It was just like, okay, well, I've kind of did really well in these things. Like I want a new challenge. And so Informa for, I'll give them credit there. They kind of created a role for me at the time, which was basically go research a trend, see if that trend has potential to be, kind of an industry and a community, and then figure out how we go and grow organically through events, media properties, or some other solution. And so that's when I met or kind of partnered for the first time with the guys at Ritholtz, because I had this idea for this event, which kind of blends advisor tech with investing and practice management. And at the time, Schwab Impact was really the only event that kind of focused holistically on the growing advisor audience. And so that happened. We had this amazing thing in year one, all the momentum in the world, COVID hits. And so COVID gave me an opportunity to really think about what I wanted to do with my career, if I wanted to stay in the event space again, if I wanted to go and do my own thing. Really, what was it? And so I spent a lot of time, and then that was really I would say, the catapult or kick in the ass to go and create Future Proof.
So, for those who are still living under a rock and have not heard the buzz of Future Proof, give us the overview.
Yeah, so Future Proof is a media and events company, and our main focus is to kind of modernize the wealth and investment management industry. And that's like, sounds great, but like what the hell does that mean? And so we basically use events and networking technology to better connect our industry and to do it in a way that feels, again, more approachable. And our goal really through this is, one, we want to help remove or reduce the friction that occurs in our industry. I look at it and say that um, there's a lot of old, tired ways, and no one ever questions like, why do we do this? And we're just kind of starting to do that. And I think a lot of it ties back to just the average age of a financial professional in our industry, right? I think the number's always shifting, but it's around like 57, 58. And when you think about it, like, folks like us, it's like we're operating in a different way. Like we use social media for leisure, we use it professionally, we text more than we probably make phone calls. We're, digital first professionals, if you will. Well, for the 3 decades before, 4 decades before, it was not the case. And so we're still operating from an event standpoint like that. And so our quick view was, while the industry's changing, events need to change with it. What do events post COVID look like? And the view there was, well, content is important, but it's not the reason I would travel around the country or the world, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, David's, speaking at this session at 2 o'clock. Let me go fly over to California. I'm like, no, I'm just going to click my phone and listen to your podcast almost in real time, right? And then I'll go and listen to everything, and I'll consume it that way at my leisure and as much as I want or as little as I want on demand. And so why would the event value prop be, oh, they got this keynote speaker and they expect like that's going to drive attendance? And so it just kind of, we thought about it a little bit more of like, well, then what is it? Like why do events exist? And we just kept landing on, especially for our industry, it's networking. Like you need to go and strengthen your community or increase your network, because that's how we all grow. You grow professionally and personally. And so Future Proof is the kind of view or the product of that thinking, which is a events company that has this very modern style to formats, which is festival. Call it a festival. People are like, oh, what's a wealth management festival, right? And the view on top of that is just like thinking about how events make you feel when you go to them, right? And I'll leave you just one little comment. When we first started, I basically asked around my family, my friends, people, that I worked with. Hey, what's the best event you ever been to? Every single person, I kid you not, every single person, like a work event, like a conference, or like any event. And it's like right then and there, it's like, why do you have two different buckets? Right? If you think about our work and our professional and personal lives are kind of blending together now, why shouldn't events reflect that as well? And so that's what we did with Future Proof. It's an industry focused event business that blends personal development with kind of professional conversations. And then we blend that even more so with a very powerful networking technology, which we call Breakthrough, which allow people to set up one-to-one meetings, group discussions through roundtables, as well as kind of shared moments and experience. And it's all based on, verified data. So what we do is it's not just, oh, I'm interested in podcasting, let's say. Like you and I could be of the same background, have the same profession, same title, at the same stage in our career, what have you. And then we're naturally interested in podcasting. So we're there for that interest, but naturally we're rubbing elbows. It's like, oh, we have a lot more in common than just the random encounter. And that's what the magic is around Future Proof. Um, I would say it's structured serendipity. If you could ever have something like that, it's hard to explain.
One of the things that caught my eye and put you guys on my radar initially is so when I was an advisor myself for 7 years, um, I was suited and booted every single day. You know, tie the whole nine for 7 years to the extent where when everyone gets excited to put on a suit for a wedding, I felt like I was going to work.
Yeah.
Weddings weren't exciting for me. And I look at the conference and I'm like, what's going on? Like everyone's chilling because I haven't worn a suit outside of a wedding for the last 8 years because I vowed to not. What I'm wearing is what I wear.
Yeah.
And I I, at this stage in my life and career, based on whatever got me to tell myself I wasn't going to wear a suit again, I wouldn't go to a conference just for the reason that everyone's wearing a suit and I'd have to wear a suit. What was that decision process like or conversation like to make it a point to where it's like, hey, you don't have to be dressed in a business professional manner, or was it not even a conversation? It was a starting point of future proof. Help me understand that.
Yeah. Well, like everything at Future Proof is different, and we did it intentionally. And one is, a kind of savvy business move. We want to stand out. It's a very crowded events space, right? And so the other side of it is, what does the industry need? Like, we need to shake it up. If we're saying it's the, modernization of wealth management, well, it starts with how your appearance. It starts with your confidence. And, we throw around these words like, oh, be your authentic self and all this stuff. But like, what does that truly mean in a professional setting? And so like how you just described is like what you believe it to be. We're not anti-suit. I think some people have these like, oh, unconference conferences, and it's like a theme and they want to be, punk rock. For us, it's like, no, come as you are, because you're qualified to be here. You're a financial professional. That's our number one kind of, thing. You have to be a financial professional there. And then it's be whoever you are. And we want to bring that out, because the human side of you is really how you're going to grow your business. It's how you're going to find the best clients for your business. It's how you're going to feel comfortable and doing the work. And it's how you're going to grow. And so, our view was, all right, well, let's call it a festival instead of a conference. Let's make it casual instead of buttoned up. At every stage, 45-minute overcrowded panels, no one gets value out of them. Let's do 20-minute sessions. That's the first thing people were like, I can't get nothing out of it. Like, no, you can. You just can't bring the same fluff and filler that you bring to every other conference. So prepare more, right? The idea of content at conferences is not to give you a live press release. It's to say something that provokes or allows someone in the audience to think differently, and then be approachable in the crowd and have conversations around that. It's about to spark dialogue in real time with these people. And so when you start to think about everything from the clothing to the kind of format to everything, it's really just breaking up the monotony of what we all think this is how it is. And so, yeah, the the clothing was the easy one, because obviously when you're outside in the sun all day, you need to be a little bit more comfortable.
When was Future Proof launched?
20 September 2022.
So you were sort of kind of on the tail end of the world shutting down. Um, there's quite a few people that I know that either, were in some sort of event role, like more event planning, if you will, not, owning an event company, or even folks who owned a lot of Airbnbs that got absolutely burned because they didn't have the capital to, keep them afloat, who made a decision to just get out of that space entirely, because they saw for the first time how quickly their livelihood could be taken away from them. What do you think gave you the courage and the confidence to start an event company, having just experienced the world shutting down?
I mean, it was so obvious to me. Like, so let's go back to, really it was around the time like April 2020 when I was still at Informa and this is again the largest live events organizer in the world, right? Trade shows, conferences, small like mastermind tile, like every single type of format. They're the largest company in the world in this. And every single person, all they would come out of their mouth is like digital, hybrid, virtual only. And so we spent, I mean, a lot of time and energy internally and then externally pitching that the future is this and as a replacement to event as live events. And then simultaneously outside, like the world was, I would never travel, right? Think about how you felt during that time. I would never, like, I don't want to get on an airplane again. Like being in a room with strangers and germs, like what, breathing? Like we were
Breathing.
so, like, it really was. It was like, how are we going to breathe next to each other, right? It was like, I mean, it was so heightened and rightfully so at the moment. For me, though, having kind of been kind of grown up the way I have and have experienced many different communities across these events, and I've kind of grown comfortable in my own role and the relationships I've built over time, I just started to realize like, well, I don't think this is true. I think live events are going to come back. They're certainly going to be different, but like this is a moment in time where everyone can think, past a year or 12 months, or 18 months or sorry. And so at the time, I was just like, shit, this is the best time to do it because now I'm playing at day one. I'm at an even level to companies and events that have been here forever, that are staples into companies' budgets, on people's calendars, doesn't exist. You wipe the slate clean. So for me, in like an entrepreneurial view, I'm like, this is the best time to do it. And then you could talk about like that was my view, and then I went and go and try to pitch it, and you can imagine like trying to raise a little bit of capital there and say, hey, I got a an idea for a live events business, and I ended up finding an old client of mine who was like, yeah, I'll invest in this. It sounds like a great idea, and we got off to it, and then had to have the conversations with all the companies, and so this is we didn't have a website yet, and so first thing I did was go through my like LinkedIn list. I'm like, all right, who do I, let me start dialing, catching up with people. So I went through like, all my big clients from, older days. So yeah, I'm working on something new, would love to have a conversation. So like, get the right people on the call. And I'm like, I got an idea. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And people are like, oh, like they were wanted to see like what I was going to be working on next. And like, I'm creating a wealth festival. People were like, the hell? I had one guy who's, I'm not going to name, a big asset management firm, close friend of mine. He had like, the whole brass on the call and he's sitting there and he just texted me. He's like, dude, don't ruin your career. and, and like obviously like they're like huge sponsors now and love the events. And he always jokes around with me about is like, hey, remember that text? Like, oh my God, I couldn't have been more wrong. But at the time, it was very hard to conceive that live events were going to come back and be meaningful. And then more so an event like this that felt very consumer centric would be something that the wealth management industry would need and desire.
It's interesting looking back, during that time period and observing and analyzing how people reacted as it relates to a scarcity mindset or looking at it more opportunistic. Because to your point about wiping the slate clean, um, it's it creates an even playing field for someone like you that's on day one, page one, with the big boys and
Yeah.
girls, so to speak. Um, so one thing that I'm curious about, so when you went through your background, you basically mentioned, for lack of a better way to put it, and for me to get to the question, job, 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 founder and CEO. And I have a belief, I could be wrong, that most entrepreneurs are born entrepreneurs as it relates to where like they have this natural wiring about them that either manifests itself immediately or certainly at some point, or they're just incredibly unhappy and angry people because they never scratched that itch.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone becoming an entrepreneur that's meant to be an employee. And that's being an employee is not good or bad. It's just different paths of life. So I'm curious to know what or who or your situational upbringing led to you being an entrepreneur after having jobs for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you describe it like that because I think anyone, in my family or who's known me for, I guess before um future proof would have said like, oh yeah, Matt's a born entrepreneur. So I think you're kind of accurate there. Look, I was 15 and in high school and I went to a prep school. I got recruited to play basketball and football. And so I got recruited to a prep school. So the first time I realized like I was poor, 'cause I'm like, holy shit, like all these people have money. Like this is what life is like, to me, like in the environment before that, like you're not exposed to any of it. And it was a great, it's a school called Stepinac in White Plains, New York. It was phenomenal. But there is like right away, I'm like, oh, I can make money here. And so, at the time, I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud, but like I would go down to Canal Street in New York City and there's like these buildings where like you have to like knock weird and like they'd let you in and it was like a rundown building, but each room had like knockoff like, designer bags and all these different things. And not the
Hmm.
stuff you see on the street, like it was like higher, like, higher rating. And it's like you had to know people, you had to call in advance. This is crazy thing. Anyway, at like 15, I got plugged in just randomly. I was walking around New York City. I was always just like talking to people. And I got plugged into this Jamaican guy. And he was like, oh, there's this, come here. And it was like super sketch. In hindsight, it was probably a really bad idea that I ended up doing that. But anyway, I became a plug, right? So I had it. And then I would run these pocketbook parties all throughout my sophomore and junior year. And I made a ton of money. And I would host these pocket parties for the football and basketball moms like every Friday and Saturday and I'd show up with like this whole like back of the car type of offering, bring wine and cheese, and all the moms would get together at one of their houses, and it was amazing. And so like I laugh now because it's like so silly, but it was a great source of income at the time, because sports were always very important to me, so I really couldn't work that much. Fast forward college, same thing. It's I got into a fraternity, went to school in Providence, Rhode Island, got into a fraternity, and it's like, man, we're doing all this work, like, trying to recruit people. And like you always do that in like nightlife and all of this. I'm like, wow, this is like a small city. I think I can network with the owners of all these nightclubs and bars and like organize it because they're all competing with each other. It's like, why don't we just organize where it's like you're the this that night and then we all go here and then we all go there, everyone wins. So I did that. I opened up a nightclub company and pretty much Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday like my company would be the hey we're going here and it would line out the door and I brokered a deal at the time used to be like oh you'd get just the door and I was like no I need more I need the door and 15% of the bar and like I remember like one of the nightclubs was owned like by the Boston mob and the guy's like you're no I'm like an 18-year-old kid he's like no and I'm like well then we're leaving and it was just like the funniest interactions and so unfortunately after all that I think the reality of like I think my being naive and thinking I was like at 22 going to take on the world in finance and then having the door closed on me made me really discouraged, lack confidence. And then I spent the next, let's call it 8 years, like finding myself because I was forced to be successful in the career I was in to, dress a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. Don't talk about your background. It was this molding that I don't think anyone had any bad intentions that were grooming me, but it was just how it was. And then it took me to really like 30 to be like, no, this is bullshit. I need to go and be me. And I had a little bit more confidence where it's like the best relationships I had are the people that I got to know on a personal level. And that's how the business excel, was great for me. So I totally agree. I'm aligned with you. I think you have like this entrepreneurial gene. I also think you could be a successful operator in an entrepreneurial setting while not having that. But yeah, I've always kind of been that thing. And then I would say there's different phases, different seasons. I always like to look at like my parents, like watching my dad. My dad and mom moved in together at 16 and raised my aunt who was 14. They had my brother at 20, me at 22, and my sister at 24. So like I was exposed to them like struggling and figuring it out and like just gritty my entire childhood. Like it was just there wasn't nothing hidden. We couldn't hide it, right? And so just seeing that and seeing like the kind of the dog in like my dad or back against the wall mentality, chip on the shoulder, whatever you want to describe it, gave me the oomph to go and be like, I could do this. I could be in rooms. I could talk to people that I may not quote unquote be worthy to. Fast forward in a professional setting, I finally got into format. Like to the person who jump started me to kind of go and create future proof was a gentleman by the name of Matt Hogan. He was my old boss. He was formerly at Inside ETFs. He became boss and mentor when I joined in 2016. He ended up leaving because he sold the company and had a 2-year commitment to him. And then for the next 3 years, he was just like, you got to go do this yourself. Like you're making all this money for the company. Like you're taking all the risk on a personal standpoint anyway. Like you have ideas, go do it. And he kicked me in the ass and did it. And then, every, phase, I have people now that I call on. Like the thing that most people don't talk about as entrepreneurs is you have to be strong for everyone, right? Like I'm having this call, everything sounds, it's up and to the right, right? That's business. We all talk about it like that. But like emotionally, it's draining, right? The weight of as your team scales and the responsibility of they're not just relying on you, their families are relying on you, right? In wealth space, right? When you're quite literally, dealing with your client and supporting them generationally, right? With what you do, like there's heavy weight to that. And so just having an outlet, not necessarily maybe like a structured coach is necessary, but even just people who are in it or have experience with it where you could be vulnerable, I think is critically important. Sorry, I went on a tangent there, but I think that's we don't talk about that enough. And that was been my since I started Future Proof, the thing like the thing I thought were going to be harder, which is like the work stuff, became easier. And it was like, oh, that was yeah, you got to do it. But it's like, all right, I went to 0 to 1, and it's like, all right, I could figure that out. The things I never thought about it have been the hardest things, which is like how to create a great relationship with my spouse. How do I not feel guilty in front of my kid because I have to work, but like I have to do this? And it's like you can't be a superhero everywhere. Time's finite. Like all these different things that you have to either get comfortable with or focus on and prioritize that when this goes up and this is down for a little bit, you got to, it has to switch and figuring that out. And those are the tough things that, I've had to figure out over the last 4 or 5 years.
Very similar in many ways, and that was great, Matt. So you alluded to something without using this exact word, but all the call it peripheral responsibilities and stresses of an entrepreneur is what people don't talk about or see. Um, and frankly, an entrepreneur barely, but they can handle that all that stuff and figure it out. Whereas the employee, or you said operator, I say intrapreneur, someone
Mhm.
who can think entrepreneurial but isn't necessarily comfortable with the risk or the added responsibility, can be highly effective and highly successful inside a thriving organization. Um, Also, it's funny that one of your inflection points was prep school. So I grew up we were in the house from I think I was 5 or 6 until I left to go to college, where the kitchen cabinets were metal, rusted, and didn't have any knobs on it for 13 years,
Yeah.
you know? And then I went to a school called St. John's Prep, where I was recruited to pay tuition and apply for financial aid. And and um, I remember, making friends there, and a couple like key moments were just in the car line during drop off and pickup, like just seeing the vehicles. I was like, damn, these are nice. Or
Yeah.
going to a friend's house and I'm looking like I'm watching a tennis match because I need to move my head that much to see the whole house. And I'm like, damn, like I didn't know that this, like my prep school was 30 minutes away. And then, similar to you in college, I won't say how, but I was very entrepreneurial as well, and made some good money, and it taught me a lot of really good lessons that I still use to this day, and selling and incentivizing and building relationships and all that type of stuff. And then I forgot but remembered when you brought up Providence, but was Fishco when
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
okay,
That
okay,
was my
yeah.
Thursday night spot.
Yeah, that was our Thursday night spot. So you probably made a couple bucks off of me and my friends going
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, it's interesting. I have another podcast, by the way, that's more of a passion project called Business with the Boys, where we interview business owners of all different industries. And it's amazing. I haven't heard the same story like more than once. Or
That's cool. Yeah.
it's everyone has a different story, but they all have the same lessons. So it's amazing to see how people can go through totally different experiences but come out with the same advice,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. So uh yeah, I love that bit a lot. So feel free to continue to go off like that. Um I'm curious to know, where is future proof going? Okay, so you say media and events. You've had a lot of success over the last few years, at least from the outside looking in. When I look at the amount of attendees and sponsors, and it's like, damn, like they blew up overnight, aka over the last 15 years that you've been figuring things out in general. But what's on the horizon for the company?
Yeah, so well, when we started, I had this desire. So we started as a company called Advisor Circle. And the reason being, because many people are like, oh, there's just so many names here. Like, why do you have so many brands? And my original thought with the business is I wanted to create a holding company. And I wanted to create a more modern media company with the goal of not relying solely on sponsorship, advertising, digital marketing service, what have you, because that business was and still is just really in question. It's kind of going under a transformation itself. And so instead, I was like, let's create these big media properties, create large communities, and then instead of monetizing in a transactional way, like let's go take minority stakes in emerging asset managers or ETF issuers in fintech companies. Companies that I know and believe in the founder, love the product, but the one kind of consistency is they lack really good sales, marketing, and distribution support, right? Like breaking through. It's a very hard industry to break through. And so I've always found it easy to do that. And so for me, it was, oh, this is like the perfect blending of skills and let's go do that. And so I was in love with this idea of like a hold co and we'll I'll make investments and do all this. And the truth is, when Future Proof launched, there was a ton of naysayers, right? There was a ton of people that really, I mean, publicly, like wanted us to fail or like laughing at it. Didn't get it too. I'm not just saying like people were just out to get us. They were just like, what is this silly thing? Um, and then we broke through at year one. I think people that were there, we had 1,600 people, and they were just like, man, this is refreshing. This is different, right? It was like all the words that you would want, where they're almost still curious. They're like, what did I just experience, right? Um, and then year two, we further established it. Like it grew to, 2,600 people, just under 2,700 people. We learned a lot year one. It was the first time, like, I didn't, never had to rent bathrooms before, right? And like the events I used to do. And so there's just a lot of learning moments. And so we listened to the audience, listened to all the feedback, good and bad, and just perfected the experience in year two. That coupled with great ambassadors and just friends in the industry advocating for us allowed us to scale it. And then year three, it scaled even further. And so between year two and year three, I kind of looked at it and was like, wow, this is bigger than I thought it was going to be. Right. And I was like, this has more also meaning. Like I had someone in at the end of 2023's event, the second year. And I'm not going to say his name, but he's probably around like 29 years old now. Financial advisor, uh, runs his own RA firm, has like 10 employees, like really successful, especially for his age. And he was just like, hey, I just want to let you know you changed my life. And it's like you kind of laugh at those things and you're like, oh, it's like it's an event, right? And then he followed up with me after and was like, hey, I met so and so, so and so. And it was like 15 random connections. Some were people that now work for him, some were people that he partnered with now. He's talking about, merging with another firm. And it's just like, that's activity. Like we're not sitting here. It's like, it's defined to be this or this. It's like something for everyone. And so that moment and that kind of leaving 2023, I really sat there. I was like, wow, like this is just different from what I originally intended. And so I had a decision to make. It's like, do I continue with this thing that really sounds sexy to the outside world? Oh, this whole house of brands and all this stuff. Or you just like block out all the noise and go really deep into this future proof concept. And I made the decision to do that. And so in November of 23, I kind of told the team, I was like, hey, we're going to, at the start of the year, we're going to rebrand. We're going to kind of get rid of Advisor Circle. The whole co-model is out the door. We're going to be future proof and we're going to turn this event, this annual event gathering into a business enterprise. It's going to start in a couple of months with a new event and it will continue to grow from there. And so that year, which was last year, we ran Future Proof Retreat for the first time. So that's a more niche, more intimate gathering of C-level executives across the wealth management channel. And we did that in Colorado Springs. And most people, again, very similar to the festival, it's like they went in there with some assumption of what they might have thought it would to be from what they're familiar of going to. And it was just a complete like, whoa, transformation. Didn't know how to what to make of it. We learned a lot there and we're going to improve it again for 2025. At that time, I just started to see a bigger trend of people, the types of meetings that were happening at our event. Because again, we have access to all that data. We could see the types of conversations that were happening directly with me or with others. And I just started seeing a larger trend. It's like, whoa, this isn't just wealth management as an industry that's, under, complete transformation. It's the entire financial services ecosystem. And if you think about it, like just pull out a little bit and you're like wealth and investment management, like as a whole, is it going to be operating the way it's operated the last 20 years in the next 7? I think absolutely not. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, right? Technology is transforming how we operate. It's also transformed the products that we could offer. It's transforming who we serve and how we serve them, right? And then you think about the workforce. All of us as as staff, as operators, we're not going to stuck. I just described my story of like my 20s of trying to figure it out. Like I hope no one has that experience. And so it's on us now as leaders, as decision makers in a professional setting to ensure that staff coming after us is operating in a more modern setting. And it's not casual for casual sake and, not professional, none of that. It's just being who you are. And so from there, I was just like, wow, there's just so much more opportunity. And so we had quickly announced a new event, which is taking place this March, Future Proof Citywide, which is a much larger, expansive audience than just wealth management. It's bringing together wealth management with kind of the technology industry, with the institution, what we would consider like the institutional audience traditionally. And the goal is there is to create a larger ecosystem event. It's taking place in Miami Beach. It will have a South by Southwest type of feel, meaning it will have an outdoor area similar to what people know as for the Future Proof Festival. But in addition to that, we have all of these hubs in South Beach. So we've taken over the Betsy Hotel, we've taken over the Villa, which is the old Versace mansion. And so we're going to be running content and experiences and other activities for different groups that will be attending. And so the idea here is that over time, this could become a 10,000 person citywide event. Whereas if you are, a head of research at Morgan Stanley, or you're an RAA CEO, or you're a, pension fund, you'll have enough there between the content, the networking opportunities, the experience to have it be the most meaningful event you attend each and every year. And so that's our kind of long-term view of that event. But that is also, a way in which you could kind of see us growing. So future-proof, we believe we can modernize all financial services events, and we could do that through the same core component that made Festival special, which is to hone in on the networking experience. How do we better connect our industry? And if we could do that, we believe business could get done faster, we could all grow, and then we could serve our clients more. And so that's kind of the end all, vision. And I would say if you had to fast forward to 5 years time, like what's success look like for me, aside from obviously growing a business, I want to help change the optics of wealth management, right? Every year, I don't know when it comes out, but if you look on Twitter or X now, every year there's a certain time where you get into the echo chamber where it's like, financial advisors are, trusted less than used car salesmen, and you do all these different things, right? And it's like we all sit there and pontificate about it, and like, oh, it's bullshit, or blah blah blah, but we all don't do anything about it. And so, for me, I believe future proof is a mechanism or a tool that could hopefully start to do something about that. And my view is the way in which the event setting is the outdoor, right? It's casual, it's bright colors, it stands out, it makes people feel comfortable. Our activities are very like, you know, different activities you would see in a professional setting, right? And that's all intentional because the coverage that we could have, if we could do that while also having really serious and meaningful conversations with industry titans and emerging people coming into this industry, and we could showcase that through social media at scale or through likes of like CNBC and Bloomberg out to millions digitally through broadcast, well, then everyday people who might not be allowed to attend the event because they're not financial professionals, but that are scrolling social media or watching TV could say, like, what is that? Future proof? That looks like Coachella.
Mm-hmm.
And now, guess what? What's future proof? And they go look up wealth management. Oh, I thought wealth management was for that person. Oh, I thought wealth management was this. Or I thought wealth managers look like this. Because we all have these views, right? And our industry doesn't do a good job of marketing itself in that way. And so our long-term view is if we could change the optics and create more trust with the wealth management industry to everyday investors, that will be like I could die a happy man.
I love it. And you're right as it relates to the industry doesn't do a good job in marketing itself in that way. And it's funny how you are starting off by trying to serve advisors, but as you continue going, you're through what you're doing, ultimately be serving consumers because maybe that's the thing they need to get them over the fence to actually meet with an advisor and get their shit together and make sure they're planning for their future. Um, I'd be interested, Graham on my team, when he edits this episode, to look at our word count. I think this is the least I've ever talked on the podcast, and it's been wonderful. So I appreciate it. It's cool to be able to spend time with you and someone like you to you see the pictures on social media, you see the videos on social media, it piques your curiosity, but to understand what makes you tick and to understand why you're doing what you're doing, where you're going, um, I can see why you're a founder and CEO because you have a captivating way of sharing your story and your vision to be able to build a team of high performing folks to help see that through. You're very convicted, which is great to be on the receiving end of that. I do
My
have
wife,
two.
my wife would say that's my worst trait. She calls that
Well,
stubborn.
that's funny. Well, yeah, we won't go there, but I have two questions to wrap this up. So number one of our staple questions that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them, and it's our way of distilling a reading list for our audience. And you had made mention that the book that you wanted to talk briefly about is When Breath Becomes Air. I haven't heard of that. So tell me why I should pick it up.
Yeah, so super interesting. Like I was thinking about this question. I was like, oh, I love biographies, especially of entrepreneurs. Like that's my thing. So I jam on that, all year. But the one book that I always pick up and every so often, every couple of years and reread is this. And so the book is non-business, non-professional development. It's basically a reflection. So an individual who was a neurosurgeon um ended up uh, getting cancer. And he just writes a very deep and personable story of, his upbringing and working really hard to get into medical school and sacrificing everything. And then only to find out that he was diagnosed with, I believe it was stage 4 lung cancer, at a very early age. And, he had his whole life ahead of him. He worked so hard. His wife was also a doctor. And there his life completely changed. And it kind of goes through his own reflections. It's very emotional in some ways. It's not sad. It's more of so for what I get out of it, it's more of like a reality check of, figuring out who you are and what's meaningful to you and pursue that every single day. And I don't want to sound like cliche, but like, tomorrow's not promised. And this book really hit me in a weird time in a weird way because it's one of those things where everyone's like work hard, you have to become someone. And this person did that. And by how luck of the cards, like it was taken away from it. And then through that, it wasn't like, oh, his last days were this. Like his days were very meaningful. He appreciated all of his family. He focused on catching up with his friends. Him and his wife ended up getting pregnant. And so he had an infant baby that he got to see. And so again, like some people could read this and it could be very, oh, it's so sad. And it hit you. It's gut wrenching at times. But if you actually pull away from it and after reading it, you just think about all of the many nuggets. And to me, it's especially in today where it's like you're taught to work, and I work 7 days a week. I'm on call 24/7. I also coach all of my son's sports. I cook my wife dinner almost every night when we don't have like practice. And most people are like, how do you have the time for this? It's like, because that's what's important to me. Because if I were, God forbid, to drop dead tomorrow, what would my son in 20 years say about me? What would be the memories he has? Right? Because you and I, like, yeah, this podcast might live on, but you aren't going to be thinking about me that much in 20 years in that way, right? And so I always think about, if I were, ill right now, like who would be by my bedside? And many a times it's a reminder, like, go pick up that call or be present for that person. Or more importantly, when you're there with them, put this thing away.
Mhm.
Stop worrying about everything else. And that's the one thing I love about coaching is, when I was presented with the opportunity, like my son was like, hey, I would really love you to coach my football team. And my wife just looked at him and was like, don't commit to it. Like, you can't do it. And I travel on everything. I was just like, right then and there, I was like, what do you mean I can't do it? And so like, I'm like, yeah, I did. And then in my head, I'm like, oh shit, how am I going to do this? And I would say it's the best thing because even on the sidelines, if I were just a parent in the crowd, I'd probably still make it to 95% of the activities. But you know what I'd be doing? Answering emails, something coming in, making phone call. And guess what my son would be doing? He'd be playing and looking over every time he wanted to, get that reassurance of like I'm doing something. I would be somewhere else. I'd be physically there, but somewhere else. And through coaching is, you have my son's 9. I have 10 to 15 9-year-old boys who are crazy. And I have to keep their attention for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and then coach them and teach them life lessons. And to me, that's like the greatest honor. So this book really allowed me at a moment in time where I was like, I need to do this because like back against the wall, work, work, work. Reminded me of like, whoa, like, let me pull back. Like that is important. But if I were to die tomorrow, what would I want to be known for? What would I want to feel inside based on the relationships I have? And then let's go do that. And so I implement that into my life. And every time I get into this, like, oh, we're launching something new, and you go, you over index into work. I kind of have this book right there for that reason. I kind of look at it and just like, what would this guy give to have another 2 days, or to see, his child become a 5-year-old, become a 10-year-old, get married, whatever. Right. And it's like, live with that purpose every single day. So probably different from what you're used to hearing.
Well, with my wife and I expecting, I can use all the uh, perspective. So you just got me to invest $15.82, and it will be here in 2 days because it was under the $25 for next
For
day
Amazon,
air.
yeah.
But
It's a
it'll
quick read too. I
uh,
mean, you won't be able to put it down, I promise.
awesome. Well, if I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about how do I attend a future-proof conference? I want to, at the very least, learn more. Maybe I want to follow along with what you guys are doing over there. What's the best place for me to go?
Yeah, go to the website, futureproofhq.com. We'll have a little bit more about the business, our team, and all the events that we do annually.
Love it. Well, Matt, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your perspective, and I appreciate your vision of what you have for the industry. So thanks for hanging out for a bit.
Likewise, man.
All
Appreciate it.
right, take care.